Hey friends, it's RSKT, and in today's video we're going to be covering this tiny little modular synthesizer I've got before me here, and it is a sound design beast. You can get a lot of crazy, cool, weird, heavy, and beautiful sounds out of this little system. It sounds very alive, very full of movement, and the best part is that you don't have to repatch it every time you want to jump to a different sound. This is very much a set and forget kind of modular synth with a big trick up its sleeve, and that is its ability to jump between different effect routings at the press of a button. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at what this synth is, we'll look at how it works, explore some of the different sounds that we can get out of it, and most importantly, learn how to build and patch it. I should also quickly mention that this is not a sponsored video. No one's paying me to say any of this. I just really like this synth and I wanted to share it with the world. Obviously, I'm going to be rambling a lot as this video goes on. So just to help break it up, I'm going to be cutting away to different demo recordings I've done with it, just so they got a little bit more of an idea of the types of sounds that it can achieve, and you don't have to hear me rambling on and on for ages. In fact, let's look at some demos now. Okay, so what exactly is this? Well, for those that don't know, this is a modular synthesizer in the AE Modular format. AE Modular is something that I've been covering on my channel for a little while now. It comes from Tangible Waves, and I've been making the AE Modular video library for a bit, and that's a series where I kind of take one module at a time, do a deep dive into what it is and how it works, and then I usually put a few demo patches towards the end. So if you're curious about individual modules that are available in this, I highly recommend you go check out that series. It's a lot of fun. At this point, there's well over 100 modules available from Tangible Waves alone, and there is an ever-growing list of third-party developers, and they're all really cool. We all chat on Discord, and it's a great little community. Obviously, just going off the size of my hand alone, I'm sure a lot of you can tell that AE Modular is tiny. It is not Eurorack. It is a tiny modular synth format that uses these breadboard cables for patching. Most importantly, it is affordable. So I would say as far as hardware goes, this is probably the most cost-effective way to get into modular. I've only had my system for a few years, and in that time, you know, these black panels have become the standard. Just before I started, they upgraded all of these sockets, so they're now a lot better. There's been revisions of old modules, like the master module here, that have just made it 10 times better. There is a ton of new third-party modules that have come out as well, and we even have a new case standard. So a lot of the old cases, for example, just use these ribbon cables. You know, you put your module in, hook it up to the ribbon cable, and then flip it over on the back and screw your module in and you're set. But now we have these new quick swap cases, which are fantastic. They come in all different shapes and sizes, so you can get, you know, double rows or big ones or small ones like this. And yeah, no ribbon cable. We've just got this big bus board down the bottom, and that means that we can plug our module in and we can just pop it straight out like so. And we can even do this while the system is running. So, you know, you can rearrange things, move it around, and when you're ready, Just shove your module back in and you're good to go. This is very, very easy to get up and running with, and you can hook them up to other cases and sort of grow your system from there. They are very sturdy metal, and yeah, I'm really loving these new quick swap cases so far. So that's what the AE Modular format is. Now, what exactly are we looking at here? Well, this is just a synth, so it just makes sounds. There's no internal sequencer or anything like that. I just wanted a small synth I could take around and control with an external piece of gear, like my Deluge over here. So yeah, in today's video, I'm using the Deluge just as a MIDI controller. And yeah, we're controlling this via MIDI, but you can also control this via CV and gate, which Deluge can also do, but we're not using that today. You can just plug those into there. You can get an extra module that expands on the amount of CV and gate you can use. And finally, we can actually control this just with an audio source. So we could plug something like a guitar or something else into this and control it then, but we'll dive into that a little bit more later. You might also notice that I've got the Empress Zoia over here, and that is because we can send audio out of this system into the Zoia and back into the system for further processing. So while this could definitely benefit from being bigger with, more modulation and sequences and all that, I just really wanted to keep this nice and simple with not a whole lot of controls, and I want to keep it nice and small too. I could quite easily throw this into a backpack. It's barely bigger than my organelle. I would say that this is probably the size of an OP1 and actually fits perfectly across the top of my Deluge. So I can just sort of patch and control it with my Deluge and do all sorts of fun stuff that way. And yeah, going back to trying to keep it simple, while I'm sort of moving through this, as you'll see, I'm not really editing a lot of controls. I'm changing the filter. I might switch to a different effect. The main thing I'm controlling are sort of the synth sounds itself, and then everything else is kind of just set up to be left alone. Like I set up the modulation on this weeks ago. I patched it all in and I haven't edited it once. I've not even touched it. It's just doing its thing and I'm really happy with what it's doing. So let's do a deep dive into each of these modules, which over the course of time is going to slowly reveal the inner workings of this little monster. Once we've finished going over everything, we'll patch it all up from scratch just so that you can see how it gets put together. I wasn't originally going to do that, but I figured I can't really recommend this synth and then just not show beginners how to patch it up if they actually choose to go out, buy all the modules and assemble it. So yeah, we'll just save that for the end. So kicking things off, we've got the master module. So we've got MIDI in over here, and that is coming from the Deluge. Now we're actually hearing this just in mono, so I'm only using one audio out. You do have two audio in or outs, but yeah, we're just using one audio out because I'm saving this other one for a special bit of the demo later on. And yeah, on here, we've also got, controls for Omni or legato. We can choose specific MIDI channels. We can choose specific MIDI functions if we want to as well. And we've got control 1 and control 2 in or out, which is for CV and gate control. The master module also delivers power into the rack. Think of it just as like the all-around power and in and out tool of a modular. But there are also other modules that let you connect with the outside world, like the STOMP Inno down here, but we'll look at that later. For now, let's focus on the sound source, and that is Rains over here. And for any modular enthusiast out there, they're already going to be quite familiar with what this is because this is just a clone of Mutable Instruments Rings. For those that don't know, Rings, or Rains in this case, is a resonator, meaning that it likes to simulate things being hit, strummed, or plucked, kind of like strings, cymbals, and drums. Yeah, we've got a lot of different sounds to choose from. So this isn't going to be a deep dive into Rings or Rains by any means. I'm going to save that for the video manual. But still, let's look at what we got here. So Rains mainly has an odd and even output, and so there's the original Rings. Each one's kind of got like a thicker or a sort of grittier tone, and they kind of play on the on and off beat. We don't need to worry about any of that today because this version also has just a combined output of those two signals. So we're just feeding that into the audio out and straight into the Deluge. Rains can be used in mono, duo, or polyphonic mode, and in a way, it's kind of got its own envelope built in. So what I mean by that, right now, we can see there's this poly light, which is green, so it's in mono. We're only going to hear one thing at a time. If we press poly again, now we're getting some overlapping notes. So this is duo, we're hearing 2 notes at a time. And then if we switch it one more time, we can get 4 notes at a time. Really great if we open up the dampening. So yeah, I mean, that's already pretty great. Now we can use the type down here to change the type of thing that is being hit. You can get some cool FM sounds, play with the structure knob. Try that again. So what the structure knob is doing is changing the emulation of the type of material that the thing we're hitting is being made of. Try not to get too hung up on it. It's just a really good way to drastically change your sound. Brightness controls the amount of high frequencies we have in there, and dampening controls the length of the sound and can even make infinite drone sounds if you want it to. So when you turn this all the way up, you can sort of set it to be a drone, and it actually starts to produce more harmonics from its own sound. There's a nice bit of movement in there too. Finally, position changes where the object is hit or strum or plucked or whatever you want to say. And that's going to lead to a lot of changes in the sound. Sometimes it can sound a little bit like filtering. Sometimes it can sound like pulse width modulation. So yeah, it's pretty fun. And obviously I've got this hooked up with a ton of modulation going on, so that there's always something happening with the sound. Now, before we move on from range, I should also point out that we're not limited to just these 3 modes. So we can actually hold down on type when we've got one of them selected, and it will start flashing. And now we have a different mode selected. Press that again to go back, select a different one. And we can do the same for the other one. So yeah, lots of cool sounds to sort of explore there. And I should also point out that there's a special knob combination that you can set up, which unlocks even more modes, but we're not going to be doing that today. We're just going to stick to our original 3 because I find I just get enough sounds out of that I'm really happy with. Finally, something else that's really cool is we can take audio. So I'm just going to use my pocket operator over here, just because it's nice and simple. We'll hook up audio 2 to the output of this. And let's record something. Take me to your leader. Oh yes, I should turn up the volume of this a little bit.
Take me to your leader. Take me to your leader. Take me to your leader.
And there we go. Let's turn up the dampening. Down the dampening and up the brightness.
Take me to your leader. 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 Take me to your leader.
So if we start playing with the dampening now.
Take me to your leader. Take me to your leader.
Yeah, we can start resonating with audio. Now, if I switch to a different pattern, maybe a drum pattern. Maybe this one. Let's change to a different mode. Pretty cool. I don't find myself using this often, but it is pretty neat that you can. So just something to keep in mind. You could definitely try something like hooking up a guitar or another sort of instrument to this and just controlling it that way, and you could still have a lot of fun. Now, moving on from Rains, we'll quickly talk about these two modules over here because these are controlling all of the modulation. So straight off the bat, we've got modulators. And I might just make this a slightly nicer sound. Cool. So modulators kind of has three modules in one. We've got a little envelope up the top section here with attack and decay. And I actually hooked this up to the brightness control just because it makes reaching for the brightness a lot easier. So you can hear that's quite sharp, or you can dim it, just in case things start getting too harsh too quickly. I've also got an LFO down here. It's just a triangle LFO going up and down, and I'm using that to modulate some of the parameters on the MULTIFX over here, which we'll get into a little bit soon. And finally, we've also got this random down the bottom. Now, this is actually really cool because we can get a random signal, so you know, random square wave going up and down. We can control the tempo of it just by tapping this button. But if we hold down on the button, we can switch between a few different modes where it's like the sort of sharpness of it and whatnot. So I've actually got it set to slew at the moment. So it's just sort of going up and down with nice sort of curves. So yeah, I'm basically using it to control the position parameter on Rains over here. So if we open up this dampening, we'll increase this a bit. We can hear it moving with this light. We'll switch to a different mode. So yeah, we're only doing it a little bit just to sort of get some breathing movement happening, which I really like in a lot of my synth patches. So that's modulators, pretty basic. Now next to that, we've actually got the only third-party module that I've got inside of this rack, and that is 2 Auto by Kaya. I've covered this extensively on my YouTube channel in its own dedicated video, but it's one of my all-time favorite modules. Basically, again, we get 2 modules for the price of 1 in here, and it is a CV recorder. So I've got it all locked at the moment, so I can't accidentally bump anything and stuff it up. But basically what you can do is grab a knob. As soon as you grab it, it starts recording, and then you can twist the knob around and it'll record your knob's movements. While that's already pretty useful, what we can do is actually trigger this from an external source, and we can also sync it up with our MIDI clock. We can also loop it. And yeah, we can also lock it, which is super helpful. So I'm just sort of using these to modulate effects on the MULTIFX over here. And that's helping provide like a lot of really cool sort of funky sounds. Now, we can't really get into the rest of the modules without now talking about this switch matrix over here. And this is where things start to get really, really cool. The switch matrix has a bunch of inputs and a bunch of outputs, and we've got Rains and this MULTIFX, the filter and the STOMP IO all being fed in and out of it. And what it allows me to do is change the configuration of what is patched through what. So right now, let's pick a different sound maybe. Something like that'll do. So right now we're just hearing Rains. If I go up a preset, we're now hearing Rains through the MULTIFX. So yeah. The MULTIFX, we'll quickly talk about this. It's got 15 different effects built in, and each of those effects has 3 parameters that can be adjusted using the parameter knobs or modulated with external CV, which is what we're using these modulators over here to do. The other thing I'll quickly say before I demo the rest of these is that it's actually pretty useful to have this in this rack. Obviously, I don't have a mixer or any way to control volume. And one way that I've been getting around that is when using the MULTIFX, you can actually control the input level and the level of the dry signal. So that can be really useful as well. So we've got a few different types of reverb. Movement feedback we've got a few different types of delays. Now, because of the modulation I'm doing, not all the delays sound good. This shimmer actually sounds pretty great though. Awesome stuff. And yeah, a lot of weird delays. One of my favorite delays is actually a glitch delay down here. I love the way this sounds. Oh yeah, I should mention too, I've got this all set to a low sample rate at the moment. I usually have it set to high, and you'll notice there's no pre-delay anymore. So some of those reverbs will probably sound a bit different now. We've also got flanges and choruses. Pretty neat stuff. So yeah, that's what number 2 is doing. It's routing range through the MULTIFX. bump this up one. Now we're just routing range through the grunge filter over here. Yeah, so grunge filter is pretty sick. Basically, we've got a low pass or a band pass that we can use. We can change the characteristic of the resonance using this hard or soft control down here. We can add overdrive and distortion by flicking that on with a switch up the top. And we've also got FM, which means that we can modulate the cutoff point using the incoming audio signal, which can lead to some pretty cool and gnarly results. In hindsight, I think I've put this in a pretty stupid spot because I've got these cables coming in and out of it. I probably wouldn't be too bad if I was using ones both the same size, but either way, let's have a listen to what we can make it sound like. So pretty normal stuff. Playing around with the resonance. Nice and subtle. Or we can make it hard. Great, now let's turn on the, oh sorry, I still had frequency modulation on. Sorry, let's do that one more time. There we go. So yeah, let's turn on distortion. It's gonna get a bit loud. And yeah, let's turn on this frequency modulation. Great. So what we can do now is move up to number 4, and this routes the grunge filter into the MULTIFX. So we can switch to something like chorus maybe. So those are some of the different effects routings that we have. And from here on, we're basically just going up another 4, but this time introducing the stomp in out. The stomp in out is routing our audio into the Zoia and then back into the switch matrix. So we're going to turn on the Zoia for now and just pick the first preset. This is the latest firmware with all the nice sort of user patches thrown on there. And just before we do, maybe we'll jump back and just pick a nice little sort of sound to work with. That sounds good to me. Let's go to Loop Forest by Red Means Recording. Great stuff. And obviously we could switch to any one of these and get some cool results. So yeah, I mean, I think it goes without saying we've got a lot of options available to us, and I probably should have taken the time to point out, just in case anybody doesn't know what an Empress Zoia is, it is a guitar pedal, but living inside of it is a modular synthesizer. So you can sort of throw modules down and patch them together and make your own modular effects that then you can use with guitars or whatever other bit of gear that you have in mind. So obviously now if we go up, we're going to cycle back through the first lot of effects, but now with the Zoia. So we can bring this up and let's say I want more reverb thrown onto this. Maybe we can switch to that cool glitchy delay I've got set up. We could go to a different one. Maybe we'll go to Shimmer. Something I could hear at the end or the start of a Rob Zombie song. Sorry, I really liked that. That was cool. And then, yeah, finally, we've got Rains going into the Empress Zoia, into the grunge filter, and back through the effects again. So now, we could make this pretty awful. Let's try something else. I mean, yeah, as you can see, pretty crazy sounds we can get out of this thing. Some cool Adam Jones from Tool style guitar dissonance. So obviously, yeah, using the switch matrix in conjunction with all of these things saves a lot of time. I don't have to fiddle around with modulation and I don't have to fiddle around repatching anything. It's just sort of changing the routing anyway. So having the switch matrix here allows me to set up custom routings. And yeah, I've only used 8 of these slots in here. You can use up to 64 of them. So we could, if we really wanted to, set up a bunch more where Rains maybe goes through the MULTIFX before the filter and so on and so forth. let's recap what we have here. We've got a tiny modular synth that fits into a backpack. It can be controlled by MIDI, CV, gate, or audio. It doesn't have to be repatched to get great sounds out of it. We have 8 different effects routings, and we can add even more if we wanted to. All combined, in my opinion, it offers up a ton of unique sounds and movement with very little effort. Thinking about ways that we could expand on this, you could definitely keep this rack the same size, ditch the switch matrix, and maybe have just one fixed routing. And that wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing either, because you can still control the effects level both inside here and outside using the onboard controls. The filter opens all the way up if you need it to, so you can easily introduce these effects manually as you need them without having to repatch the whole thing. You also don't really need this many modulation options. I always like having a lot of modulation, but you could choose different modulation modules, or you could ditch the 2 auto or ditch the modulators if you wanted to. Swapping these things out could afford you room for a small sequencer like the RBSS from Wonky Stuff, which is kind of like a Turing machine. You could even throw a quantizer and an attenuator in there if you really wanted to, or a clock source, and basically sort of throw a sequencer into this and ditch some of the stuff that we've got here. Maybe you don't want external stuff. Maybe you don't want the switch matrix, and you don't want one of these modulators. That's going to allow you a lot of other creative possibilities. Of course, getting a second rack or a bigger one would also solve a lot of these problems, but I'm trying to get the most out of the tiniest size. I think it also goes without saying that you don't need rings or reins to do this either. You could pick tons of different other oscillators that might be more up your alley, like the FMOS that's just come out. It's a revisioned FM. There's the 555 oscillator. There's lots of different things that you could go with. There's even a wavetable oscillator, which is pretty fantastic as well. Okay, so I've saved this bit for last. I even considered not including it, but I thought that it would be pretty remiss of me to recommend something like this and have a beginner go out and purchase all of this stuff and not really know how to patch it all up. So yeah, here's just a quick little walkthrough of how we're going to patch everything. And of course, in order to do that, I need to unpatch everything. So I'm just going to rip out all of these cables. So it's important that we focus on our first 4 or 5, if you include the master module, first before we start worrying about this other stuff, because this is sort of like the basis of everything. And then once you involve the switch matrix, it gets a little bit more complicated. Okay, so let's get started. First off, we need to send MIDI information into this thing from an external device. We're using the Deluge. So I've got the Deluge set up over here. If I enter into the keyboard view and start pressing on things, we can see that the little gate light lights up on the master module. And I hope that you can see that past the cables. Now we want to send that gate into the strum input of rains. And that is basically what's going to be triggering it. So we'll take that from the first bus gate straight into strum. And now when I press stuff, yay, we can see that this little light is being triggered. So now we need to be able to hear the output of rains. So we're going to take the first output and we're going to plug it into the audio output one. So yeah, the first one. Sorry, I said that really weird. Great, and now we can hear it. Great, so we can hear right now that no matter what key I press on the Deluge, we're just getting the same note, and the only way we can change the frequency is with the frequency controls. So we want to be able to send the pitch information from the Deluge into rains. So let's take another cable here, and we're going to take the bus CV output. I'll just take that from the first one, and let's plug that to the volt in, or the volt per octave input. Now also, while we're at it, remember we did plug audio into this earlier. So what we're going to do is we'll take the audio in out 2, which is this top right hand side one over here, and let's plug that to the input up the top. So now if we were to plug our pocket operator or anything else back into this jack, that's going to act as the input into rains. Now that's most of the stuff set up for the MIDI and the rains side of things. So now we can start looking at a little bit of modulation. What I like to do is I'll trigger this envelope from the bus gate as well. So that means that just like what we did for rains by sending the MIDI information, we're also using that same MIDI information to trigger this envelope up the top of modulators here. And now we can take that envelope and start to modulate things with it. I used it to modulate the brightness, but you can use it to modulate whatever you want. And so on rains now, we can choose whether we want this to be positive or negative. So I'm just going to bring it down a little bit. And now we've got some sort of left-hand control of the brightness over here. Again, not really necessary, doesn't do a whole deal, but I just found it was really useful to sort of help me experiment with different sounds by having it positioned over there. Now, something that did make a lot of difference to the sound is I liked to use this random LFO down here. So we're going to take the random output and I plugged that into the position control. And if we just move this to the center and maybe change it to the left. Let's make this really drastic so we can hear it. So every time that light changes, we should hear some difference. So I just had it sort of twisted just slightly, just for a little bit of movement in the sound. Already sounds so much more alive. Moving on from here, let's quickly talk about the multi-effects. I'm going to take the output of rains and swap that to the mono output of the multi-effects over here. And then we'll take the output of rains and we'll just whack it to the input over here. Great. So now we want to modulate the multi-effects, and you might want to be a little bit more careful about how you go about this. I kind of just patched it willy-nilly. I essentially used the 2 auto over here to modulate CV1 and 2 of the multi-effects. So take the output B and plug that into CV2. So we could already hear some movement now. It's definitely a lot more noticeable on things like delays. And we've got one more CV input that we can modulate. So I'm going to take the triangle LFO and modulate CV3 with it. Now, that alone is enough to have so much fun with. Just that one little setup. Now we need to introduce all this other stuff and the routing. And I'm going to quickly warn you now, I don't know if it's just me, but patching up the switch matrix kind of did my head in a little bit. Looking back, it's kind of simple, but sort of walking through it can be a little bit difficult. So let's just go through it one by one. We want to take the output of Rains and plug it into the first input of the switch matrix. And obviously we want to take our switch matrix first output into our audio output. So I'm just going to unplug the MULTIFX over here and we'll swap that for the output of the switch matrix. So because we've got input 1 being sent to output 1, we can just hear Rains. And that is our first switch setup. Now what we want to do is route Rains through the MULTIFX and then to our audio output. So let's take the output from the switch matrix and we'll take output 2 for this and we'll route it to the input of our MULTIFX. Then we'll take our MULTIFX out and plug it to the second input on our switch matrix. Now, just before I switch to the second preset, it's important that once you set this up, you save it using the save button, and then we can go up our preset. Now we can see here that input 2 is being routed to output 1, and that means that we're taking the output of the MULTIFX and routing it through output 1 to our mixer. But we can also see that input 1, which is Rains, is being routed to output 2, which is what's going into our MULTIFX. So really, we're sending Rains to the switch matrix, to the MULTIFX, back to the switch matrix, and then to our audio out. Cool. So what I did from here was take the second output of Rains, which is just the same as the first. And we're going to plug it into the in-H of our grunge filter. And we do it into the in-H because in-L is for low signals and H is for high signals. And I've just found that plugging it into in-L it blows the volume out way too much. It's too loud. So yeah, I plugged it into the in-H of our grunge filter. And then we want to send grunge out to the third input on our switch matrix. If we go up a preset, just turn off the distortion maybe. There we go. So yeah, as we can see on the switch matrix, input 3 is being routed to output 1, and input 3 is just Rains being fed into the grunge filter. You've probably noticed, yeah, I've got this other little one up here. It's not really necessary. I mean, you could switch that off and everything still works. I just had it switched on for some reason. Now, before we move into using the stomp in out, if we go up one, this is what's sending our grunge filter through our MULTIFX. And this is where things, I don't know, in my head start getting a little bit confusing. But we're using input 2 to output 1. And what is input 2? That is the MULTIFX. And what is output 1? That's sending it from the switch matrix to our audio out. But we're also using input 3. And what is input 3? It's our grunge filter. And we're sending that to output 2. And where does output 2 go? That goes into our MULTIFX. So ultimately, it's sending it from Rains to the switch matrix, to the grunge filter, back to the switch matrix, into the MULTIFX, back here, and then to our audio out. I think that's right, but yeah, I think you get the idea by now. And that moves us on to the final part, which is the stomp in out going into our Zoia. So we're going to actually take the third output of the switch matrix here and route that into the stomp in out. And then we'll go from the stomp in out into the fourth input of the switch matrix. Now we'll need to turn the Zoia on. Maybe we'll just use something a little bit more noticeable. There we go. So yeah, it's all working. So I believe that that is everything patched up, and just like any good fitter and turner, of course I've got one cable left over, but I think that's because originally I was sending a copy of the bus gate to the mult on rings and then using that to control the strum, and it wasn't really necessary because I didn't actually use it for anything else. Either way, obviously from here we need to look at our other presets, so just going up one. So this is routing our Zoia through our MULTIFX. Great. Going up another one. This is routing it through our grunge filter. And then going up one more, this is routing it through our grunge filter and through our MULTIFX. And yeah, that is essentially everything in a nutshell. I hope that I didn't miss anything, and I hope that that was clear and easy enough to understand. As I said before, I don't know why, but setting up the switch matrix sometimes can really do my head in because I just get confused at what's going in and what's going out. But yeah, once it's all patched up, as I said a billion times in this video, it's set and forget. So we don't really need to do any more patching or anything now. We can just leave everything as is and then just sort of jump back to where we want. If you really want to play around with sort of repatching things, obviously you could go from here by changing how the modulation is set up from the 2 auto and the modulators into the MULTIFX and range. You could sort of get a little bit funkier with that, maybe duplicate some signals using the mults on these 2 and feed that into more things into range. There's just a lot that you can do just with these 4 modules alone. Obviously, there's even more that you can do with the switch matrix as well. For example, you know, we're kind of going from using range and then range to the filter and then the filter to the MULTIFX. You could sort of reroute things. So maybe you want your MULTIFX being sent into the filter first, or maybe you want the MULTIFX going into the Zoia first before going into the filter. So the possibilities really open up. I just sort of set up the first 8 here because I can't really see myself using those others. But using those others might be exactly what you're after, depending on the sort of external gear that you've got plugged into this. And finally, yeah, I think it goes without saying that if you really wanted to open this up more, you could get a second quick swap case that just plugs in nicely using the side panels here. And then you've got an even bigger case to work with. From there, you could plug in more sound sources or sequences or modulation. So the sky's the limit. Then you're really sort of starting to look at a complete modular setup. But either way, what we've got here is great. And I hope that some of these ideas are getting some gears turning inside of your head and helping to inspire a lot of people out there who either have modular and they want to sort of explore new possibilities with it, or who have never touched modular and they really want to know what it's all about and just what they can get out of it. If you've never touched modular before, I highly recommend going out and checking out VCV Rack because it's free. You can learn a lot of the basics by using that. And then if you're not ready to break the bank by jumping into something like Eurorack, AE Modular, as you can see, is a really great alternative. It's small, it's portable, and it's affordable. And I cannot recommend it enough. Anyways, that's it for me today, everybody. I hope that this video has been insightful to somebody out there. Hit the like if you like, and if you don't, tell me why. Please subscribe, check me out on Patreon, and thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.